Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody. It's Ken Calvert, and welcome to the Father Joe podcast. I'm joined by my dear friend, Father Joe Grimaldi. And as I like to ask you each and every week, I trust you had a good week and a nice day today, yes?
Well, the nice day is bringing me here today. I'm very happy to be able to do this, and I appreciate it a lot.
You know, we were talking about this. We both really enjoy doing this, obviously, or we wouldn't be doing it, but you were just telling me and complimenting me as well that this is not something that you go, oh, heck, I have to go do that.
No, I look forward to it.
Yeah, he looks forward to doing it. Topic that we're not looking forward to discussing today, but unfortunately we have to over the past 7 days. We learned last week that I believe it started with Kate Spade, the fashion designer, and then surprisingly enough, Anthony Bourdain, CNN,
restaurateur and all of that.
Yeah, the remaking of The City of Detroit, a great piece on the Packer plant and whatnot. So we lose Anthony Bourdain, and then me personally, in my life, I had two dear radio friends affected by suicide. A dear friend. I found out over the weekend that his daughter took her life. And then I found out that a fellow that I worked with for some time, great voice, took his life. And it's devastating news when you get it. You're a priest. I don't have much of a setup here. You must have to deal with it. Is suicide going up? Are you noticing anything in the ranks?
I'm not an expert, but I would suggest that it is. The other thing, not just being a priest, but having been involved in schoolwork for so many years, along the way you hear about these students who were very often very top-notch students, also very, very fine businessmen in the world, happily married, seemingly, with children and so on and so forth. And wow, every so often the S word, the suicide, was committed, and you can't figure out why. And very often they will leave a note, not always, but they'll leave a note. Is that all there is? And Ken, you know, you were bringing up that song that
Peggy
people
Lee.
remember. Yeah,
Peggy Lee did so many years ago. It was so depressing, but I remember it.
But it's depressing with good reason. I think this is something that a lot of people that commit suicide think about. Is that all there is? The other thing I think when it comes to suicide, I don't think the individuals who commit suicide are really thinking about the people they leave behind, because they are hurting those people to the nth degree, particularly a mother, a father, a brother, a lover, or whatever, a wife, a husband. These are things that people forget because they can't easily put their pieces together once they hear the news that so-and-so died during the night committing suicide. I think this is a very tragic event that occurs. I think it is increasing. I don't know why. You know, one of these things that bothers me, too, I know that in the field of crime, I should say, you have people that say, well, it's copycat murder. And there's a lot of people that are going through severe depression. They're going through lack of funds. They're going through an unhappy marriage life. They're going through a dissatisfaction with who they are. And so when they look around and they see someone like Kate Spade, who was married, had a daughter, and very successful in her design work, they see Anthony Bourdain the same way, they say maybe that's the answer. And unfortunately, for some people, that might be what happens. Unfortunately, that occurs sometimes.
It's such a difficult topic to discuss. I will say or suggest to you that when the person that elects to commit suicide, I can only imagine what's going on. Now, there's also disease involved. Manic depression, bipolar disease, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, all sorts of other factors that may be involved. But the friends that we have that seem so incredibly normal, happy, successful, all of a sudden killing themselves. It's so hard for anyone to digest or understand, let alone the family. So I suggest to you that when somebody takes their own life, that they didn't take their own life. They took a part out of me, they took a part out of their family, and their direct family, they also sort of passed away that day.
There's no question in my mind. It hurts everybody that they know. Unfortunately, they don't think that way while they're going through it. I think of depression as a silent killer in so many ways. People do get depressed. However, they have to put up a good front when they're involved in the business world. They have to put up a good front where they're involved in interaction socially. They have to put up a good front when they go out with their friends and relatives. Oh, yeah, things. Now, I'm not speaking about a severe depression because that takes them out of the picture completely, and they usually are bedridden by then. I'm speaking about a depression that they try to manage in their daily lives. Mm-hmm. Now, that, of course, brings no solution to them when they're trying to think these things out when they're alone. I mean, as long as they're with people, they smile, they could put up that front, and it seems to work. It seems to work. I don't think it does. But when they're home by themselves, they start thinking, maybe this is the solution. Mm-hmm. Get out of this rat race. I don't want it anymore.
Right.
I just think that's the only answer. We haven't even touched on the theological aspect of it, but
I want to go there, but I just wanted to say, don't you feel like in my case, maybe even in your case, people expect Ken Calvert, the voiceover guy, the DJ. Did you ever meet Elton John? What about Paul McCartney? So you almost feel like you're coming into the room sometimes, or I used to, as here comes Ken Calvert. I was Ken Calvert, but here came Ken Calvert. Father Grimaldi. You're Father Grimaldi, but you walk into the room and it's like, oh, look, there's Father Grimaldi. But they don't know what's going on inside of our heads.
No, not at all.
They don't know that we might be horribly, horribly sad or depressed. How do we get to somebody? Father Joe, what do we do? What would you recommend? And then we'll get to the theological portion of the program.
Well, let me say the way I've dealt with it in the past, in the near past too, because I have a number of friends that have depression. It's so bad with them that they would rather spend the whole day in bed, not having to interact with anybody.
Right.
And they just put the sheets over their heads and they feel that they're fine. They don't feel that they're fine. That's the problem. You know what I mean?
They feel like they can hide.
They can hide. So what happens is this, that after a lot of time doing this kind of thing, they want to have some resolution, and the resolution they come up with is finish it all. Now, very often, the people around them do not pick up clues, and this is a difficult thing. They don't pick up clues. You know, I am so sad that I just don't think I even want to live that much. We just passed that by. It's a comment that, maybe he or she doesn't really mean it completely. I think we have to be alert to what is said and what is not said. The expression on their faces, the way they express that type of comment, these are all very important aspects of what that person is trying to relay to us. Basically, that person, I need help.
Right.
Please help me.
Right.
But we don't know how to do that. None of us. I mean, I'm not a professional psychologist, or we don't know. So we do the best we can. One of the things I've tried, and it seems to ease things a little bit, but in order to get people involved socially, I would try to pick out 1, 2, or 3 close friends of theirs. Mm-hmm. You can't have a crowd. They won't come to a crowd. But they will come to a small group. even if it's one other couple, let's say, that they may know and they trust. And then you could bring them in and try to interact with him or her socially, as it were. Huh?
Let me just stop you for a second. But where would the starting point be with that? It would have to start with the person that was, let's take the person hiding under the sheets.
No, that person can't do it. But I think someone who loves that person
can see that and direct it?
And direct it and just say, you know what, Jake, I'm going to invite about, you must know the McCarthys. You must know the Zanes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to invite them over on Friday night. But, it'd be nice if you could come too, and so that we could all be together.
Oh, I like that.
That type of thing.
I like that.
And so that we're not putting pressure on anyone. However, these people that do love him and know it. What's interesting, I find that so many people are aware of the people that are hurting. The other thing I want to say about depression, it always bothers me a lot, particularly during holiday periods. You speak about the 4th of July, you speak about Christmas and Easter and so on.
Father's Day.
Yeah, Father's Day. These are very important days in people's lives. And so what happens is you have to understand and pick out why Jake, or whatever his name is, decides to stay home and watch TV by himself,
yes,
as everybody else is going to a party for that day, for a dinner or whatever the case might be. Now, that's another sign of a depression that needs help badly. You don't want to leave that person alone. Unfortunately, because we're inexperienced, all of us, we don't know what to do, we don't know what to say, and so we just kind of, okay, if he wants to be alone, let him be alone.
But sometimes you can just read it in their body language as well.
Yes,
I guess it goes back to that. If you see something, say something. But you don't want to embarrass anybody, and you also don't want to over-dramatize the situation, too. Somebody just may be having a bad day. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly. No, you have to be intelligent enough to decipher what is the difference in this case. Well, if the difference is such that you, as a Christian, are obliged to reach out, or you, as a human being, you don't have to be a Christian, as a human being, you're going to reach out to this fellow human being who is really hurting at this time without making a big deal out of it. Do it tactfully, quietly, but do reach out as much as you can.
I think if that could possibly be the greatest thing a friend could do, is that if they do notice something and their friend says, thanks for asking, I'm going through a rough patch. At which point you say, I'm going to help you then, man. What do you want to do? What do you want? I mean, do you want to see Father Joe? Have you ever considered sitting down and talking to somebody else? You want to just use me for a while as a sounding board? What's going on? Tell me why you're so sad.
Okay, you know what? And of course, this is just a matter of preferences, but I would limit the questions as to what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Just, how are you? And let him or her do all the talking. Don't leave that person, but be with them. Just be with them. If we bombard them with lots of questions, can I bring you over to the church? Would you like to see the council? Would you like to see, and all of this other stuff, they become overwhelmed and they could shut us out completely. And I think a way of doing it that's different, I wish I were an expert, but I'm not.
You sound like it to me right now.
But it bothers me a lot to see people that are depressed and we don't know how to handle it. I don't know how to handle it. I do know this much. They don't want attention. So to confront the person in such a detailed way, I would hesitate. However, to say, hey, are you doing okay? You're looking sad. Is something you want to talk about?
Yeah.
Then, once the conversation, if it begins, if the interaction really works, then it's a good time to suggest, well, I've heard that so-and-so is a very good listener, and maybe you'd like to talk with him a little bit. But as I say, we have to limit our questions or else they feel that they're being bombarded.
Yeah.
Not all of that leads to suicide. However, if we could prevent someone from going into a real deep depression, I think that's a tremendous help, because that's when suicide plays an important part.
Okay, part two. So you've obviously had to conduct a funeral of one that's commit suicide.
Correct.
So I'll start with this, because, well, maybe I can't because I'll get emotional. My friend is Jewish, and his daughter took her life. So he happened to mention, he said, but isn't it the belief of Catholics that if you commit suicide, you go to hell?
I was going to bring that up. There's no such thing. What happens is people are limited in their knowledge of Christian thinking and Christian dogma and Christian beliefs. There was a time when that was the case. There was a time when you could not even have Mass for someone who committed suicide. I think people have learned that that is not the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, when a person gets to the point that he actually is going to pull the trigger or hang himself or herself, that person is no longer in his or her right mind. And so we cannot judge. We don't know. We just don't know. So we can't judge.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody needs prayers, I think those are the ones that need the prayers.
You've said that before, and I was hoping you were going to say that. That maybe, you've said this before. Why on earth would you compound a problem by saying, well, we'd love to conduct a service, but we can't? You know what I'm saying.
Exactly. And masses are not for the deceased anyway. We could say the Mass for the deceased, but the Mass is for the people that are alive, okay? Mm-hmm. That's just a ceremony that we have, and we could pray for the deceased. What's wrong with praying for someone who's hurting? There's nothing wrong with that. Mm. And I don't care if you're Jewish or Buddhist or whatever the case might be. I've dealt with all of those. I mean, they still need spiritual help at that time. When we cut out any type of spiritual aspect to our life, to our living, I think we're hurting ourselves in the long run. And if we decide intentionally to cut out a higher being, in our case God, and in the Jewish case God, we're hurting ourselves, because things are not always going to go smoothly. So as we go through our daily challenges and so on, there are going to be times when we just want to scratch our heads and say, what is going on? And if we don't have a God to which we can address these questions that have in our minds, we're going to be all alone.
I can only imagine the parents' sadness of the loss, again, of their daughter, and I apologize.
But if they had no God, it's even worse.
Right.
It's even worse.
But it was, so let's make sure that we've corrected that assumption.
Oh, yeah.
That if you commit suicide, you're going to hell.
Who am I to say somebody is going to hell anyway?
Who the hell?
God is the only one who does that.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to say, no, you're not. Your daughter is fine.
She's hurting. That's why she did that.
Yeah.
She doesn't know. She's not in her right mind when she actually pulls the trigger or hangs herself, whatever the case might be.
Is that going into that service? There's probably nothing good that's going to come out of that, in terms of it's not going to be a joyous occasion. It's going to be a very difficult occasion for every single person walking into that church. How do you prepare?
Well, I think one of the things that's important is that the people attending that service, but particularly the family, they have to realize that the minister or the rabbi, or whoever the case might be, is one of them. And they're also questioning, God, why have you done this? We have no answers. Why someone so young, so talented, so So beautiful, now gone. Why? Why did you do this? One of the things that people don't understand fully, God is not the one who does that, whatever the that is.
Mm-hmm.
God gives us all free will. God gives us anything anything that we have, directly or indirectly, comes from God. When I say indirectly, if we were intelligent enough to do studies and to acquire degrees and so on and so forth, all these things come from God. But God does not control every little situation. He's given us free will to do what we want with what we have. So what I'm getting at is this. When someone is preaching publicly, whether it's a priest or a deacon or a rabbi, whatever the case might be, they really have to be with those who are hurting.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, they have to also ask God, why is this happening? And then, hopefully, as the liturgy or the homily continues, and then try to make some sense out of what God has planned for all of us.
It's only starting after the service, I think. Once it's all said and done and the people go home and everybody goes back to their life, and in a matter of weeks, unfortunately, this has become so typical in our lives. 2 weeks from now, our lives continue. Their lives, it's going to be different for a very long time. There are going to be stages and stages of development emotionally in terms of proceeding with their lives.
I couldn't agree with you more, I think this is very important. See, one of the things I've noticed, when a death occurs, whether it's a tragic one, like suicide or whatever the case might be, or whether it's just a regular event in one's life, the time during the wake and during the services, and usually it's about a week or two, those people are filled with nonstop love by neighbors and loved ones who are bringing them food and trying to help in any way they want.
Correct.
Now, the next time I think we all have to reach out, and we forget, is a month later.
Right.
6 weeks later.
That's where I'm
because
going.
it's gone. I mean, nobody discusses it anymore, but the family knows, and it's a good time to remember them. I just did once something that I never realized would be that much of a help, okay? I had done a funeral of a good friend of mine years ago, died in the year 2017. And so on the date of her burial and the date of her death of 2018, I sent the mass to her mother. I sent a card stating that I would remember her at mass and so on and so forth.
Nice.
It was so appreciated.
Yep.
And it was a year later, but very appreciated because a parent doesn't forget, okay?
Right.
A parent doesn't forget. It's something that will stay with this particular person forever. But what I was saying, though, there is during the funeral and even a week or so afterwards, now, for example, with the Jewish people, they have what they call Shiva at night, and so that they receive guests and things of this sort. And, of course, that gives them a lot of support.
I like that idea, by the way. I think that's really a powerful thing that the Jews
Catholics
do.
do as well,
Right.
except you have to be the right ethnic group, okay?
Right.
Well, what Catholics do is they say the rosary for 9 days.
Uh-huh.
And if somebody's home for the same idea, people bringing food, and so after the rosary they get together and they could pray, and they could also play. If you want, they can interact.
Right.
And so that helps a lot. But I think it's important that we remember these people when they need it most. Now, I'll go one more step, because this is something somebody asked me once. I feel that abandoned by God. I feel that he's abandoned me completely, so much so that I really want nothing to do with God. Well, then I start asking them questions. Well, who brought the food for the 9 days that you were mourning? Who showed you care and concern for the time after the death of the individual? God doesn't work directly. He works through other people. Those other people were representing God in giving you the comfort that you need. God did not abandon you. He provided that care and love through other people.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because we easily forget that.
I think you're
Have
right.
I talked too much?
It's a difficult topic. It was difficult to start the topic.
Yes.
It's difficult because it's personal for me. It's also, I'm sure, personal for so many people that everyone has been involved somehow, some way, affected by, touched by something as horrible as suicide. It usually goes along with something like, I wish I could have seen something. We've discussed all of that. I think you've done a powerful job. I pardon everyone for my emotions, but the person that I happen to know and lost, it's very close. It's still very fresh, very raw, so I really appreciate your words of comfort. I don't have anything specific that I want to say to end it, and I think you've delivered a really powerful message within the body of this podcast. So I thank you.
Well, thank you. I think the important thing is love.
I do too.
We're all human beings, huh? All of us. And I don't care if you're Buddhist, Jewish, Catholic, or whatever. We're all human beings.
Absolutely. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
we all do the same
And we
thing,
have
the
to
same.
reach out.
Thank you so much. And I'm unfortunately the topic was a sad one, but it certainly is one that we need to think about and talk about.
Well, thank you for the insightful questions. I really appreciate that.
All right. And we look forward to seeing you on the next Father Joe podcast.
Thanks again. We'll see you soon.
Hi, everyone. It's Ken Calvert, and we all have a responsibility to our family first and friends, of course. If you suspect that person may need help, there is help. It's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The number is 1-800-273-8255. It's 1-800-273-8255. I remind you, it's 1-800-273-8255. And thank you once again for listening to the Father Joe podcast.
This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
If you have a question or a comment for the Father Joe podcast, send it to fatherjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's fatherjoepodcast@gmail.com. Follow Father Joe on Twitter @FatherJoePodcast. The Twitter address again is @FatherJoePodcast. Please subscribe to the Father Joe podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and soon on iHeartRadio. We also ask that you rate the podcast and feel free to leave a comment. And finally, if you have a friend that you think might enjoy the podcast, please pass it along. Thanks again for listening, everybody, and see you next time.